secondly, can you both explain a little bit more specifically about how the post office redevelopment, I know one said that it's beneficial for the town as far as not taking away anything from the schools, and then Mr. Lembrick, you have a different view. I felt like that was kind of cut off. I'd like to kind of have that play out a little bit more to
You want
hear.
to go at it again. I don't want to start because I lost track.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Want to go first or second?
Well, I have a feeling we're both going to be talking for a while.
Yes.
So I wouldn't presume to speak about Mr. Lembrick's opinions. I'm not really clear on what they are. I know that he's against certain developments and in favor of others. He's against some pilots, but not others. I'll tell you what my opinion is. Where there are underperforming properties or underperforming pieces of land, if there's a way for the town to try and facilitate an improvement, I think the town has a responsibility to do that, and I think we've done that. I know that there's been a lot of talk about concerns that added apartments are going to add children to the schools, whether they're piloted or not, and despite rhetoric to the contrary, we don't have any indication that that's true. I said this at the senior forum. Everybody who does development in this part of the world and builds apartments relies upon some studies from Rutgers University that talks about how many children come from apartment buildings and go to schools. And I've said to school board members, these are the numbers we're all relying on, so if you have any evidence that those numbers are wrong, you need to tell us. And there's no evidence that those numbers are wrong. So I'm not concerned that apartment development is going to add children to the schools, because it hasn't. On the subject of pilots, a pilot has nothing to do with what the school's budget is, and it has nothing to do with how much money the township collects for the schools. The presence or absence of a pilot does not change what the school's budget is, and it doesn't change how much tax dollars they get from both towns. So I understand that folks might be opposed to pilots for other reasons, but respectfully, I think that thinking that the schools are being deprived of money, I think just isn't one of them.
Thank you. Great.
And where I think that is misleading at best is that by not bringing in full tax payments from these developers when we give out the pilots, they pay into the town, but I consider the schools part of the town. I realize Mr. Ryan wants to separate out the town budget versus the school budget, but that's a huge potential contributor to the school budget that we're not getting. That's extra money the schools could be using. So yes, in the strictest sense, it's not impacting the school budget, but it's depriving the schools of a substantial additional source of revenue that it could use for capital programs, to hire additional staff, and to just do things that are in the best interest of our kids that it can't do because it only has a limited amount it can work with. And as I talk to members of the Board of Education, as I talk to teachers, as I talk to administrators, they don't put nearly as much faith in the Rutgers study. The Rutgers study looked at a very large area. Most of the communities that the Rutgers study looked at aren't like Maplewood. They're not communities that are this desirable. They're not a school district that's this prestigious. I do think that particularly in the PSE&G Avalon Bay site, we're going to see a large number of families who are striving to give their kids a better education, who are going to be moving into those apartments. And, it's not that I don't want them to get a better education, but our schools right now just can't handle that additional enrollment, particularly at the elementary school level, and we certainly can't do it if we're not going to be collecting tax dollars for it.
Carol, can I weigh in?
Did you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in. I don't want to just sit here and not talk. It's not like me either. So I do just want to say, while I'm in my work, I've worked on several redevelopment projects in different towns. Pilots are, in fact, standard operating procedures, I said before, with redevelopment projects. I think, though, that they're almost becoming a little bit too desired or too dependent upon by, and let's just say this, I think that they've been used so much all over the country that developers now use them as a bargaining tool in large part. And I think it's important for our redevelopment agency, aka the Township Committee, to take a step back in those negotiations and not necessarily grant them quite as easily as the development community has been accustomed to getting them. That said, I don't necessarily disagree with them I definitely, don't disagree with the use of pilots. I think they're a valuable tool, especially in getting developers to develop on different sites that are, tight, difficult sites to develop on, that a developer might say, forget it, we'll just go out into where we have open land and do something much more simple. But I also think a part of the negotiation could very well be to ask in the future negotiations for a set-aside amount for the schools, a lump sum payment just as they do for infrastructure improvements. I think that's an opportunity that maybe hasn't been explored because traditionally pilots basically have nothing to do with the schools, but I think it's worth exploring. There's nothing to say you can't do that. So why not in this? You use a pilot, they get abated taxes for a certain amount of time, but also with the infrastructure improvements that you have to do at this intersection, if you're going to build here, you also need to pay the school district X number of dollars in a lump sum payment. That's just something that I think should be explored.
Thanks. Jerry has indicated he wants to
Just one small point I'd like to add, if I may. My background and training is as an engineer, and so we're very analytical and numbers driven. So I understand that people might not, if I could quote my opponent, might not have faith in the Rutgers study. But the nice thing about a numerical analytical study is the numbers are the numbers. If the study is wrong, the numbers should show that the study's wrong. And I think that hasn't really been the case. And if we find out that that's the case and the data tell us, the facts on the ground tell us that the study's wrong, I'll be the first one to admit it, because it's not about faith, it's about analysis of numbers.
Thank you. Okay, I think it's time for our closing statements.
No more questions?
I think we...
Because it's early.
Oh,
there's one back there.
okay, there's two short questions.
Very short question on parks maintenance. Ever since the town laid off a significant number of DPW employees and outsourced much of the parks maintenance to a private concern, the condition of our parks has been deteriorating. I think everybody would agree with that. What do you see as a possible way of bringing back the parks, given our current fiscal situation?
Okay.
Whose turn is it to go first?
Let's see.
Oh, go ahead.
It's, according to this, I think it's...
Who went first on last?
I think
Just is somebody ready to answer?
I'm ready to provide an answer.
Go for it.
Sure. One of the things that I've just recently become involved in is a joint effort between Maplewood and South Orange and the school district to talk about this very question, to talk about the way field maintenance is done, and more important, to talk about the way field maintenance is funded. There are some interesting things that are done funding field maintenance in towns like Summit that are really worth looking at. And so I kind of wish you'd asked me this question in 6 months when we gathered a little more data and had a little bit more to say about it. But there are, I believe that there are opportunities to be a little bit more creative. And I really also do believe that this is a particular instance where we want to think about the facilities in Maplewood as being shared with South Orange, or the facilities in South Orange being shared with Maplewood, and the school facilities being shared by everyone. So I do think there ought to be a unified approach. And so I'm very happy that this effort has at least begun to try and gather some information and get some new ideas.
Jerry, my question is broader than that. If you take a look at the bridge that's over by Baker Street, you find that the cement potholes are grown to the point where...
Okay, let's continue with that question. Let's start. Nancy, do you have anything to add?
Well, I agree that there's been, through attrition, the Public Works Department hasn't been able to maintain things as well as they should. I'm not a big fan of outsourcing. I've seen it not work in other communities. I think there's no skin in the game by the outside companies that come in and mow lawns or take care of things. So I really want to look at how we could make it work better. Whether it's hiring a couple of more DPW workers and releasing the outsourcing contracts and seeing how that can work better. I don't know the specifics of the DPW budget at this point, obviously, and so but it's a concern to me, as is tree replenishment, which is one of my big issues in town, not just in the parks, but on every street that I walk on every day in Maplewood. The empty tree pits bother me enormously, and they're bad for our environment, the lack of replenishment. I understand we had Superstorm Sandy, we had a microburst, but the replenishment has deteriorated greatly, and I'd like to see some sort of programs to help fund that, whether it's grants, and look for opportunities to start funding tree replenishment and stepping that up, because I think that's been to me even worse than park maintenance.
Okay, Greg, do you want to add anything?
Just briefly, Joan, and I thank you for bringing this up because, as I've mentioned, as the father of a 4-year-old who just loves our parks, keeping them as gems in our community is really important to me, and I've seen it week in and week out that maintenance just isn't where it should be, and I think in local government there's always a bit of trial and error, and we can't do all the things that we would want to do with the budget that we have, but I think that all of us can probably agree that it is a problem, and that that I think all of us, and certainly I can speak for myself, if elected, I'm certainly going to explore what we can do, whether it's bringing back some additional DPW workers, looking at some of the contracts we have, looking at shared services with not just South Orange, maybe Millburn and other surrounding communities as well, to share some of that maintenance and share some of the cost. And it's probably not a problem that we can fix overnight, but I think it's definitely a problem that we need to explore solutions for and make a priority.
Thank you. And there was one gentleman, and this is the last question.
Hi, John Mead, St. James Gate. In speaking with other business owners in town in regards to the redevelopment or construction of the post office building, is there a best answer to ensure that from little shops to bigger shops in town, we pay a lot of rent with not a lot of parking? Are we going to have access to be okay, to pay our bills, to have traffic still coming through town, at a place, maybe an alternative place to park?
You're not first.
A lot of people are scared when that comes about, and I'd be interested to see who has the best answer in regards to that.
Yeah, I think
it's Nancy's turn.
Yeah. Thanks, John, for your question. This is what I do. This is what I've done for 20 years. This is what I know. And when I was managing downtown Red Bank, the economic depression hit, and I'd say about a third of my time was spent on the phone with business owners who were in desperate need of therapy and solutions. It was scary. Even the hedge fund guys, even the rich people down in Rumson, nobody was spending any money, and the businesses were affected. I've also been involved in South Orange and in West Orange and different communities as well with regard to public improvement projects and how to get those businesses, keep those businesses functioning, keep their customers coming. And it takes a lot of planning oversight, communication,